big, and this may be a very big development in the case. You know, here at Court TV, we keep our eyes on the court files because that's how you get a lot of the information in these cases. There are gag orders. There aren't press conferences. We're not in Florida. They're not releasing this information, the discovery. But the attorneys are litigating the case, and they're filing motions. Take a look at this, because this is a motion filed by the defense. A motion to strike the death penalty. RE, Autism Spectrum Disorder. And then a motion to redact or seal newly filed records. So they don't want any of this made public. It's under seal right now. But going after the ability of the state of Idaho to seek the death penalty in this case, and it appears it is connected to autism spectrum disorder. So putting the pieces together here brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is, does the accused killer have autism spectrum disorder? And if so, I want to know what it is and what it means. Going to need some help for this one. Joining us, psychotherapist, author, host of Talking Live and the Bite Size podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, and former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us. Thank you both. Just before I start showing you some videos of the suspect, can you give us a little bit of a definition here, Dr. Robbie, about what autism spectrum disorder is?
So autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability, and it impacts communication and social interactions. So often people with this disorder have difficulty with social interactions, making eye contact, communicating. It's very hard for them. And in some cases, they have very specific obsessions. They get very upset if their schedule is interfered with. They don't understand their own emotions very often, and it's hard for them to understand other people's emotions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Robbie. With that in mind, I want to show you, this is a traffic stop that was done at Washington State University, October 14th, 2022. The suspect is in the car. There's this back and forth with the officer. Let's watch.
Hello, I am Officer Loangus. Stops being audio and video recorded. I think you know why I stopped you. You ran the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah,
so
I was behind you the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically you're not supposed to enter the intersection at all for that reason, because if the light turns red, then you're stuck in the intersection, and then you run the red light. So that's the reason I stopped you. Do you have your license on you?
Yep. So would you explain that to me a little bit further? So in Pennsylvania, when you're stuck like in their intersection, you have to make the left. So what would the appropriate thing for me to have done been? Just
You're not supposed to block an intersection like that in Washington, so just by you blocking the intersection, that's technically a ticketable violation, and then you're running a red light, so it's another ticketable offense. So you're not supposed to proceed into the intersection until you can go, because a lot of people do what you just did, right? Is like you're sitting in the intersection waiting, and then turns, and then you're blocking, so.
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion with speeding because someone had stopped. I wasn't sure what they were doing, and then they put on their light to turn. So I thought that maybe they were letting me go through.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No.
I feel like right before I made the turn, there was someone who made a right. They didn't have their signal on, so I wasn't sure if they were just waiting.
Yeah, so I would just advise just don't enter the intersection until you can go, so you don't get stuck. Let's see.
But in that situation, the best thing to do then would be back up and not.
I don't know if there's a best thing to do in that situation, because you're either going to back up into somebody or you're going to run a red light. So, or you're going to be sitting in an intersection.
Yeah.
There's not really a great option there.
Yeah, I was just slightly into the crosswalk, so, where I'm from Pennsylvania, we actually don't have like crosswalks.
Oh,
so even if you're kind of slightly, there's a little bit more leeway as well. Like there are a few lines, like there's one white line and there's another one. Like there's like a certain margin from which you can actually kind of put your vehicle, place your vehicle.
Yeah. So I know laws vary state to state, but there is a law in Washington for blocking an intersection like that, proceeding through when you don't, when you're just stalling. I forget the actual verbiage. I can find it for you, but it's like stalling, blocking an intersection.
Yeah. I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to.
Oh no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah. One second.
Okay. Do you want to see one more first before we comment? Let's take a look at one more. One more. This is, now that was before the murders. This one is after the murders. You know, he's presumed innocent, but this is after the murders when he's driving back home to Pennsylvania with his father, gets stopped, I believe, in Indiana.
He was right up on the back end of that van, pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay, cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we're coming from WSU, and we're scanning early.
What's WSU?
University, basically. That is SWAT team and everything.
So we're, okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University?
Yeah.
And you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours to drive. Well, almost a day.
Okay, let's bring everybody back in here. Oh. So, Dr. Robbie, are you seeing anything that would be consistent with autism spectrum disorder from his communications with law enforcement here?
Well, especially from the first interaction. I mean, usually when someone gets pulled over and they're, talking to a police officer about something that they did, they just basically say, I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. But we could see that Bryan got into this obsessional back and forth, like he was really trying to process and make sense of this interaction. It was challenging for him. We could also see too the odd interaction, the eye contact wasn't so great, the rocking back and forth. Definitely there was a disconnect there. And I actually had the idea that Bryan might be on the autistic spectrum. But again, this would have to be diagnosed by a psychologist who specializes in this or a psychiatrist. But I think we could see the oddity there, and it could indicate this disorder.
Yeah, Chris, another one of the oddities is he's in Indiana, driving from Washington State, which is far, far away, and the officer says, where are you going? To get some Thai food. Because if you want Thai food, you go to Indiana. Even if you're in Washington, you need to get to Indiana. What did you take away, Chris, when you watched this interaction? What do you take away from the suspect?
Well, I think the first thing, obviously to always understand is when you're making that type of contact on a busy freeway like that, the passenger seems to be answering a lot of the questions. So that kind of raises a red flag just for a second. But, what law enforcement is looking for, obviously, if this, allegedly, if he's involved in this incident and you're going to throw up a diminished capacity defense, then they're going to look for the type of foreknowledge, that he was putting into motion, i.e., was he doing things that he knew were proper? Was he making good judgment? And I think both of these traffic stops tell us that he was in complete control of his capacities and, in fact, wanted to engage the officers, and the first one into a debate about whether or not he had crossed that line at the stop sign.
Unbelievable, right? Dr. Robbie, New York Times did some reporting on his earlier life, right? When he was in Pennsylvania growing up. I want to read that to you. Let's put it up. The new revelations about the suspect come from posts he made on an online forum in which he discussed his mental health struggles. I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth, he wrote in 2011 when he was 16, adding later in the same post, as I hug my family, I look into their faces, I see nothing. It's like I'm looking at a video game, but less. more that they wrote here. The words were posted on a forum website called Tapatalk, previously known as Youku, where the suspect commiserated with other users while suffering from a little understood neurological condition called visual snow, in which the person's vision is obscured by scattering dots, much like the static seen on an analog television. On the forum website, the suspect wrote that he saw a, quote, sickly, tired, useless, and stupid man when he looked at himself in the mirror and felt that he did not deserve to live. Nothing I do is enjoyable, he wrote. I am blank. I have no opinion. I have no emotion. I have nothing. Can you relate? He said his absence of emotion had begun about the same time as his visual snow symptoms in September of 2009, and one friend recalled him constantly talking about his fuzzy vision. Is there any connection here? What are you hearing as this younger defendant is describing what he's going through?
I don't know about the fuzzy vision, but I think what we're seeing here is that Bryan experienced a social disconnect. He did not feel connected to his family. And then we hear the other side. So autism spectrum can coexist with depression or anxiety. And what we're hearing is also the depression that Bryan was experiencing and the low self-worth. And it seemed like they worked together. The disconnect, depression, not knowing how to feel more connected. He was aware of his inability to kind of connect and feel like a real person. And, people with autism spectrum aren't necessarily dangerous, same with mental health issues, but somehow the two of these together in an undiagnosed way seem to put him in this vulnerable place and maybe make him more homicidal in some ways.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, thank you so much. Chris McDonough, thank you as well. Appreciate it.